It's Tuesday, that means it's Trading Tip Tuesday. I want to talk about volume today. These oft neglected bars at the bottom of the screen, or for some, on the top of the screen in their own panel. This includes such indicators as volume profile of the visible range, VPVR, one of my personal favorites. It includes on balance volume, one that I've never really used to much success. And any other variation, VWAP, VPSR, I don't know. There's a whole bunch in here, right? You can look at volume, net volume, cumulative volume, on balance volume. I said that one, OBV, and then there's a ton of other stuff you can use. Now, for me personally, volume is a visual manifestation of sort of market sentiment. What's going on? It's most useful when you're waiting for consolidation. Let's be honest. I mean, you can so clearly see these volume drop-offs, right? When you measure the volume drop-offs, in this specific case, with some basic knowledge about consolidation or price action, for me anyway, it really clears up the picture of what's going on here. This is the daily chart, BTC USD on Bitstamp. So for the most part, I don't use volume on a lot of things other than just binary confirmation of what's going on. Is volume going up? Is volume going down? Is volume consolidating? Is volume declining? You'll often hear people talk about on volume breakouts, or breakouts that have a complement volume to confirm them. It's another way to think about it. Just looking at this specific, if we look at these here, and you very clearly get confirmations of volume. It either breaks the descending volume profile, something you'll hear me say a lot, especially when I'm talking about chart patterns. It'll either break the descending volume profile, or it'll be so obvious that it'll confirm trend continuation, trend reversal. It's really, for me, that simple. And another obvious one is, when I'm looking at chart patterns specifically, if I say, okay, I think this is some sort of head and shoulders, right? First step is identifying the pattern. Second step is asking myself, is there a descending volume profile here? Is volume consolidating with price? And then the next thing to ask is, I know where the neckline is for the specific chart pattern or this breakout support resist level. Does volume increase at that level? It does, and you can obviously zoom in on this if you want, and it becomes even more clearer that there's some sort of change here in market sentiment. Buyers are stepping in, either on a 6-hour basis or the daily basis. But for me, I don't really think too much about volume, especially in crypto, especially because there's 25 bajillion exchanges, there's centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges. I often get the question of which exchange should I chart, especially for volume, because it's so exchange specific. If you're charting Poloniex or Bitfinex for some of these pairs, the volume is non-existent. If you're charting Binance, the volume looks enhanced at times. And if you're new and you don't realize, like, okay, it's a big deal, it's not really a big deal. Really, I'm just looking at, it's like one of those I Spy pictures or kaleidoscope pictures where there's a bunch of stuff, where there's a bunch of little images, right? And you have to like see something in it. I'm not looking at like each day here. I'm just looking at, okay, clearly descending, breakout, 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 great, right? Like I don't personally think about it more than that, specifically for volume by day or volume by time frame. Another thing you'll notice with volume, especially on high time frames, is when we break multi-year levels of volume or multi-month volume levels like we did. So this was March, right? This should inform you that there was a lot of activity here. I better pay attention to what's going on, because a lot of people got really scared, or a lot of people got really euphoric at that specific day, at that specific price level, however you want to think about it. In this case, in March, there was clearly both capitulation and a margin cascade waterfall situation, meaning longs got hit, their stop levels got hit all the way down repeatedly to just push this further and further and further. A bunch of margin calls pushes this further and further, pushes the volume way up. This is a, what, 2-year? Yeah, effectively 2-year volume high. Like, this is insane for stamps as well. It's insane, right? Ton of volume, ton of emotion, ton of margin calls, all across the board, all exchanges. Days like this are a good indicator that there's some sort of exhaustion in the market, because this selling clearly can't continue. It's a 2-year high in volume for Bitstamp. You can't get that day after day after day, right? So typically these high volume days that stick out like this are really great indicators that there's exhaustion in the trend or in the move, because buying just can't continue at that pace forever, or selling in that case. Another day we can look at is this November 2018. You can say, well, volume, it was way up on this day, but we kept going down anyway, right? This is what's known as a divergence. We're declining despite less volume. Divergences can last for days, for a year, months, that sort of thing. So it's dangerous to see this high volume day and just automatically assume the trend is over. So it's obviously a foil to this single day high volume insanity, right? But you can use the divergence rule to say to yourself, okay, this is obviously declining. Obviously sellers are stepping in here in November. If we go like to here, we say, wow, look at how this consolidated, right? Look at how this consolidated volume. When you start to draw lines on it, at least it's easy for me to see. It's like, duh, okay. Here was what happened in all of 2018. People weren't sure. Buyers and sellers were sort of coming to an equilibrium here. Sellers kicked in for a variety of reasons in November. It was mainly miners who tipped the apple cart on this one. And we just had insane days of selling. Days of selling that were a year's high volume, basically. So that really kicked everything off. The market got very angry throughout November, December. But as this is going down, you have to think to yourself, obviously this can't continue forever. Sellers should get exhausted at some point. You get the people who initiated the move at the top here, right? Or there's all this volume. And then you get people who are late shorters. They don't realize it, but the move is pretty much exhausted. And you can see this. I like to look at this like on the 4 hour. Becomes fairly obvious when we're talking about the falling wedge in this case. You're getting lower lows, lower highs on less and less volume over and over and over again. Eventually, the risk reward gets so great for a trend reversal that people start taking the other side of the trade. Like, you know what? This isn't going down fast enough for shorts to be worth it. Volume is next to nothing. And eventually, more buyers step in as this goes lower, right? Because there's just not enough sellers. They're done. They're out of the picture. All the people who have sold have done so over the course of the move. You know, this is why you look at things like Zcash that slow bleed. Another thing I talk about a lot is a lack of volume on certain pairs. You always want to see insane volume. You want to see capitulation. You want to see euphoria if you want to take the other side of the trade. Because otherwise, this is just slow bleed city, right? This volume is just kind of meh. There's no, I mean, there are decent spikes, but there's no massive spikes here, right? Not like there were here, not like here. Even now, it's just dead pulse, nothing, right? That's the most bearish you can see, or the most bullish if the trend is intact in the opposite direction. And it's dangerous to just look at this on one exchange, because obviously if it's Bitfinex and it's not traded elsewhere, you got to look around. Is it the same on Kraken? You can fashion yourself a nice little index or use Brave New Coin for volume, that sort of thing. But even on Kraken here, the volume is just kind of, you know, very clearly 95% of the time just flat. Nothing's happening here. So I really use volume to help me predict moves, confirm consolidation, confirm breakouts. It's really a great market sentiment tool that people look at and might not realize it, that that's what's going on here. So now if I talk about VPVR for a second, we go to some random coin like ETH, go to Bitstamp here. So my settings for VPVR are super arbitrary. Like, I don't really care. The settings are the way they are so that I can see the levels here. So again, VPVR is volume at a certain price. It'll show the buy volume, sell volume. Again, not anything I pay attention to really. All I'm looking for are these notches in price, because they tell you without even looking at the left side of the chart where most of the volume was kicking in. So there's a lot of volume here. There's a lot of volume here, and the point of control is this red line, a lot of volume here. So all of a sudden you can put these nodes on your chart and you can say, all right, if we're above these nodes, it's support. And if we're below these nodes, it's resistance. That's why it's so important if you're in a bullish trend that you're above all this stuff, because otherwise you're going to have to slog through it all. You're going to have to fight through, cut through the people who were bought here and were underwater, additional sellers at this level. There's a reason these levels are where they are. The left side of the chart is telling you, oh, hey, there was a ton of volume here. Local top, local bottom. If we go to one like EOS BTC, where the VPVR looks quite dire in that it's kind of on its last leg of support here, right? It's so far below, if I change my scale, so far below this consolidation zone that even if this turns the corner, it's going to have to reconsolidate at this level because there's so much volume here. There's so many people that are probably underwater from this level that on the way up, it's going to be a massive challenge. And the same thing with this level here. And the reason I like VPVR is because it's obvious. I don't need to pay attention to anything, any volume here, nothing. It's all just right there. Like, oh, here's a notch. Okay, decent support level. So really I use VPVR mainly for support resist levels. That's kind of all I use volume for. I use it a lot for chart patterns. I use it a lot for trend confirmation, trend consolidation. But I don't personally use OBV, just another oscillator you can use like RSI. So hopefully this helps demystify some of the volume stuff. It's always good to pop on the VPVR because if we look at some of the DeFi stuff, especially like curve, and we go on a lower time frame, and you can even change this. I don't actually know. I'm just trying to change the dial here. 700 maybe? Okay, so you can see how fine, how much this gets finer as far as the detail is concerned. So it's currently fighting through all this volume, right? Like it made this W, it looks like it wants additional upside until it is above 05 and stays above 05. It's gonna have trouble. Another thing you can see here is there was a arguably divergence here on volume. In this case, bullish divergence. A second equal low on less volume. And I'll do a separate video on divergences probably next week. But volume is really helpful to just see what's going on in the market, see what's going on, how many people are selling, how many people are buying. It sounds obvious, it sounds easy. I don't think enough people look at volume enough to really understand how easy it is. So hopefully this helps in some small way guide your volume journey and help you become more understanding of volume as